Right. Hey, James. I'm so glad to have you here for WSUM.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
And just to start us off, could you just introduce yourself, tell me about who you are and who your music, like tell me about your music and Kid Souf and everything.
My name is Kid Souf. I make all different kinds of pop music. Got a whole bunch of singles coming out that are lined up with videos, and I just can't wait to share everything with you.
Yeah, and you're from Philly, right?
Yes, yep, from Philadelphia.
And it's a city with such full like musical history. There's so much stuff that has been going down there, and I gotta wonder, like, what's your favorite aspect of the Philly music scene and just growing up there?
I really like that the Philly music scene is. I mean, it has its pluses and minuses, but it's very very much art focused, and it's forced me to like when I first started going to open mics and doing things at the around town. It was kind of informative because like they do a lot of jazz fusion and a lot of R&B, which are things that I was not necessarily super exposed to. I mean, when I was little, I would do things and we would make pancakes on Sunday mornings and stuff and listen to old funk music and, stuff like that. But other than that, I was not really terribly exposed to this underground kind of jazz fusion sound. And I started going to open mics, and one in particular at Time in Center City, it's an open mic, but they have a live band there that will learn your songs on the spot.
That's awesome.
You walk up, you hand them a chord sheet, or you tell them what chords it is and what tempo, and they just start to play. And so I walked in with a couple songs and heard these guys playing. They're called the Living Sample. And it was like so beyond, like I had written them to like type beats on YouTube and stuff like that at the time. And so then hearing it with like a live sound with these like beautiful chords and the ways that they would play with the song, it was like so incredible. I actually like hired them on the spot and went in the studio the next week and recorded a jazz fusion EP. And then just went, full on all the way in with everything that way. And so that kind of informed my sound now, which is very much not jazz fusion anymore. I mean, I do still have that EP, and it'll come out at some point, I guess, way down the line.
Exciting.
Because I still love the song so much, and the sound is beautiful. But now I just, every time that we're making a song or whatever, I work with the one producer in particular. His name's Chris, and we kind of just have been working together forever. We're in a band back in high school together and stuff. But now when we're making songs together, it's like every chord he plays, I'm like, all right, add a seventh, add a ninth, just like fill out the sound a little bit more. And so, especially in the coming singles, you'll notice like so much depth of sound that comes especially from the Philly music scene.
And you're also, I would say, like a classically trained musician, right? With all of the influences, like you teach music, you teach songwriting. And in a world where we're seeing a lot of DIY musicians and people just picking up and learning things on the spot, how do you think that this experience you have teaching and having this sort of like classically trained background, how would you say that influences your music and the overall Kid Souf project?
I do have a lot of classical training. I dropped out of college to then pursue private training because I wanted to be a performer. And there's a lot of, if college works for you, that's great. I mean, it wasn't the way that I wanted to go to be a performer. To do the other parts of the music industry, it was great. To be a performer, I'd rather spend my money on private training. And so I went and found a bel canto teacher. Her name's Susan Dash, and I still work with her now. And so that, I guess, informs my music in the way that it's got depth, it's got purpose. When I take a song to her, a lot of times she'll work with specific vowels on specific pitches to adjust the way that the musculature works in my voice and make it more emotionally expressive. But at the root of all of it, I taught myself piano. I am a DIY musician as well. So, as much as I have a lot of like classic voice training and stuff like that, all of my instruments, I play saxophone and some percussion and piano, and I taught myself all of that. So I'm very much in support of DIY musicians. And
oh, for sure, it's just the extra help that really enhances the sound, and I get that.
Of course. In terms of longevity, I care about my voice so much, and so she will just make sure that I'm not getting tired on stage, and that I'm things are working throughout the whole set, even if it's I sing in a wedding band and a couple other cover bands as well. And when I do stuff like that, it's 4-hour gigs of just singing all these like hard songs, and she makes it so that my voice doesn't get tired and that I can go on the next night.
And it keeps sounding great.
Well, thank you.
And on the topic of just performing, you performed the Trocadero, which like amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
How was that experience like before they closed down, unfortunately?
It was with my that high school band that we were all part of, and I was right after, I think everyone, it was in May, so they were all graduating high school. I had graduated the year before, and it was the most incredible experience ever, because we first off sold out and headlined at the Trocadero, and the deep history of the Trocadero was lovely. I remember like we were in the dressing room on like the main stage dressing room, and it's upstairs, and it's like it really looks like it hasn't been touched since the place was made. And I was just like looking around. I was warming up with Susan in the bathroom, and and I just remember looking at the toilet and being like, Axl Rose probably did coke off of that. And it's just like something like just like a thought that popped in my head, and I was like, that's so crazy.
And it's true.
Yeah, of course. And so it's just like, that was so cool. But the coolest experience from that still lives with me now and is my kind of inspiration for moving forward was when I was performing, there was a bunch of people that I didn't recognize in the front row, and they knew the words and they were singing the words back to me. And I was like, oh my God, I was sitting on my bed writing this song maybe a year or two ago. And now there's like people in front of me that love it, that are singing it back to me. And that was the most amazing experience.
I can imagine. Yeah. And the Trocadero too, such an amazing historical venue.
It really, really was cool.
And since then you've like focused on a solo career, right? What made you do this change, and what pushed you into like Kid Souf, and what has been like your favorite aspect about being a solo musician now?
Definitely the control. I love the fact that if I want to do something, I'm going to do it, and there's nothing that can stand in my way of that. I'm very much a headstrong person when it comes to the audio aspect of recording, lyrics, melodies, production, things like that. I get really, really in depth into that. That was very much, I need to be a solo musician for that. I mean, the idea of Kid Souf came from the fact that I had moved to South Philly, and like the way that people pronounce it is just like South Philly, and from around here. So this idea of South came around because of that. And it was this weird moment that I had over quarantine, actually. This is a very relatively new project, but before I was very clean cut, very like, career focused, and I had short hair, anything really interesting about me visually. And I always wanted to. I always, like when I was little, I would dress up and do crazy shows in my house and stuff. And so it was this cool thing that came across my mind that like, when I was little, we were really, really poor. And Christmas and all those things, it was kind of just like, we were very consciously aware that we were poor and we could not, ask for certain things, do certain things. And now I'm at a time in my life where if I want to go to the store and get a candy bar, I can do that. And that's a small thing, but it's just like, I can do whatever I wanted to do as a child now as an adult, and do it for myself. I make my own money. I do my own thing. And that's a sense of ownership over my life that only came when I moved to South Philly. So it's this finding this inner child and living through it, and kind of embodying that child, making that child like a prodigy of who I am right now. And that's where Kid Souf came from.
And it's crazy how it has been such a big transformative aspect too. Like, it's not just music, it's your personality, like as you mentioned, your style, which by the way, amazing. All of your Instagram posts are so good.
Thank you.
So aesthetic.
I appreciate that so much.
And you used to do YouTube covers as well, right? Back in
I did for a little while.
I may or may not have binged through all of those.
Oh no.
And one in particular really got my attention because I am Brazilian. I moved here to the US for college. And you did a Parado no Bailão cover.
I did.
Where does that come from? Like, where does it feel like musician find Brazilian funk?
I love Brazil, and funk music in particular is so cool because, like I said, we listened to American funk growing up and stuff like that. But Brazilian funk is very much different. It's a totally different genre, and it is so cool. And I love that the history of it, that it comes from the favelas and all of the things that go along with that. And especially artists that come out of that background, like Anita and people like that have kind of risen to an area and now are bringing attention to those areas of poverty and things like that. The places that need particular government focus. And so I really love that. I love the song. I had no idea what it was about though. And
you end up finding out?
Oh yes, I did. And I was like, oh, I was just over here singing this with a smile on my face, for my mom and other people that were watching. I mean, recently YouTube decided to push it out for some reason.
So the comments, it's just like Brazilian people going crazy, which was so funny to see.
That was the real reason why I decided to go with that was people on my Instagram, a lot of them were Brazilian and from all different areas of Brazil. And so I was kind of like, let's play with this idea. I love singing in other languages. When I was in college, I spoke French fluently. I haven't in a long time though, so don't ask me. But I took Spanish, I took Latin, I obviously took French, and then studied up on a little bit of Portuguese, just enough to like understand what was being said, not in musical sense though, obviously. Yeah. But I just love the culture of Brazil. Everybody, like, they love to party. I mean, I'm sure you know this, obviously, but like the clubs there, nobody goes until like after midnight and it's open until like 6 a.m. It's like, that's such a different world that I would love to be a part of sometime.
Parties start at midnight, they end at 8 a.m. the other day.
Yes.
Or sometimes midnight the other day.
Yeah, oh my God. That sounds like a blast. I can't wait to go down.
Yeah, come to Brazil.
Yes, absolutely.
I say while living in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes. That's my dream, is to go on a live stream and just have a bunch of people commenting, come to Brazil. That's when I've made it.
That's fair. I 100% get that. And another thing that I feel like really influences your sound was disco. Just overall, where does the disco influences come from? And especially the disco aesthetic? Because I feel like, look at you right now. You look like you just came out of a 1976 party, which is lovely.
Well, thank you.
Where does all that come from?
So when I was Better as Friends was the first song that I wrote as a Kid Souf project. I guess it was written before Kid Souf was a concept, but it was like this first thing. And I remember when I was in the studio, I looked at Chris and was like, all I can see is Drillin marching down Broad Street to this. Now, we originally started doing disco just because it was fun and it was something that I thought, I just have always loved disco, and that was another thing that we would play while we're making pancakes and stuff. So I wanted to explore the genre, and this was probably like 3 years ago, right before disco pop. So maybe there was just some like inner ear thing of like people, like, this is going to do really well. So I played with some disco sounds, but then as we started to record, I saw Drillin in my head, and I'm like, oh, this is the person that's featured in the video. And just you can see it in the video, like the amount of confidence. I mean, it's like they never owned a mirror, not because they look bad, but because there's just no external viewpoint of what they're doing. And that was such an inspiration. It's what that's one of the pieces of Kid Souf. When I was building this character, I want to embody things that kind of confidence that comes from someone like Drillin. And as I started to expand my circle a little bit more, I realized that the emotional maturity that comes from people that don't necessarily identify in the gender spectrum. I mean, when you're like, I'm under that queer umbrella, but there's a certain intangible kind of just emotional maturity that comes from realizing that your gender assigned at birth is not representative of who you are. It's not, it doesn't paint a picture of who you are and what you're about. And so that form of emotional maturity and the confidence that comes from it is a huge inspiration to Kid Souf. Where that ties into disco is the whole queer underground scene, especially queer people of color, and at that time are the ones that made disco. It was originated out of those nightclubs and those things, and then the downfall of disco. Disco is a really, really fast-lived genre that didn't really exist that much. It burnt like it was a flash in a pan, but really, really bright flash in a pan because
blew up with Saturday Night Fever, and then a couple of years after.
Absolutely. And like Saturday Night Fever brought it to the public consciousness, but it was before that very much an underground thing. And so when it was brought to public consciousness and everyone was in love with it, people found the history of it and found out that it existed among queer people and queer people of color in particular. And that's when the hatred for disco came about. And if you're familiar with the Chicago Disco Demolition Night, was one of the big moments that it culminated in, of people just burning all of the CDs and screaming disco sucks and all those terrible things that caused the death of the genre, it brought it out of like public consciousness.
Quote unquote.
So now we have this awesome opportunity where in a larger sense than at that time, not the largest extent that it could be, we have an opportunity to celebrate that history that came before people, took it on and moved forward with it in a pop culture sense. And so that's what I'm looking to do, is bring it back into that pop culture, but with the consciousness of the fact that it's from these communities, and we should celebrate those communities, really celebrate the deep history of it.
So it's a lot of like retaking the genre and really emphasizing the empowering nature it has.
Of course, yeah.
While like still recognizing all of the original influences, which is great. And you mentioned like overall, how would you differ Kid Souf from James? Would you say that they are two completely different entities, or they're just one and the same?
It's the more I live in Kid Souf's world, the more I become part of him. I mean, he was built as this is what I want to be, so let me just create this character and live in this character for as long as I can until it becomes part of me. So, I mean, in a way, like the Hannah Montana hasn't met Miley Cyrus yet fully, but it's close, and it's getting closer every day.
And when you're performing and just recording music, do you feel that disparity?
I was actually at a video shoot on Sunday for the next single, and we did this really, really cool boxing thing. And it was kind of funny. Like when I walked in there, I played boss for a little bit of, telling people what we're doing and all the shots together and stuff. But as soon as I put on those boxing, shorts and stuff like that and walked out, I was like basically half naked because I just have these shorts on, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, it was suddenly like, you do this, like this person that is Kid Souf came to life, and is ultimately just an incredibly powerful person. And it's a really cool, interesting concept of like, I've heard drag queens talk about it, like when you put on your hair, suddenly you're a different person. And it's kind of that same thing when I put on this outfit, when I put on the drag that Kid Souf is, suddenly I am this person, and it's incredibly empowering.
Yeah, I can imagine. I feel like, are you excited to go back into performing and have this Kid Souf persona on stage as well?
I'm excited to get back into, because before quarantine, he didn't exist, and he does now. So all of the open mics and all of the performance venues and stuff that I worked at before the pandemic, I now have like the opportunity to walk in with a different name, different face, and different music, and get to showcase all of that in a much more true and confident way.
I'm excited for. So stop by Wisconsin.
Yes, absolutely. Honestly.
And can you tell us a little bit? I know you glanced on it, and I would just like you to go a little bit more in depth on the relationship between Kid Souf and just how you're using your persona and your music as a way of normalizing these hard conversations on queerness and gender.
I spoke with a friend of mine, Mika, who is a gender counselor, and I brought up the fact that Jerlyn was the inspiration for the first single of Kid Souf, so therefore for Kid Souf. And how do I bring that appreciation back to the community in a non-appropriating way? And he mentioned this idea of an interview and just putting it out on my platform. And I was obsessed with that. Loved that idea.
Jackie. My pronouns are she, her.
And so I guess the whole purpose of it is to normalize the conversation of just the fact that gender is not necessarily your sex at birth thing, and it has nothing to do with sexuality or genitalia or anything like that. It has to do with the way that you exist in this world and the way you introduce yourself to another person. And so we came up with a group of standardized questions, and the questions were kind of designed to have people ask themselves that question. And if they answer all those questions and they come back and they're like, yeah, I'm still, whatever I was assigned at birth, that's totally fine. But it gives you further insight to say that's not a different breed of human being because they answered the questions differently. They just answered the questions differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was like a pretty great way of starting that conversation without, trying to pander or appropriate something that I don't have any business doing.
I think you did a really good job. Like one sentence from the video really stuck out to me where one of you said that gender is just the first layer you put into whatever outfit you wear that day. Yeah. And I thought it was a really good way of speaking about it in a way that's, as I said, non-confrontational. It just felt informational and reflective. And I think that's extremely important, just overall the work you're doing.
Thank you. I mean, like I believe it was Jackie that said it's in her full interview. I don't think it made the, cut down one, but they're each like 12-minute videos that we had to cut down into a 4-minute video of all of them. And she said that there has to be a separation between individual gender and the gender that you would introduce yourself as. And individual gender, there is as many genders as there are people on this earth. Mm-hmm. Everybody has their own form of self-expression for themselves, but we're never going to erase the societal ideas around each gender. So create gender, have a pronoun that exists that says, I don't subscribe to this, and this characteristic of manhood, femalehood. And the conversation and getting that out there and just having it be something that people think about was incredibly important to me, especially with this project.
And I feel like music is another really good way of introducing these conversations because it has that universal appeal, and it's hard for someone to disagree with music. And it serves as such a really good gateway into these like deeper level conversations that we need to have.
Absolutely.
I loved your project because of that. Like the sound is great, and then you also have that extra layer, which should be extremely important.
I think pop music, it's kind of necessary. If I'm doing a jazz fusion thing, like there's so much depth that goes into that sound. There's so much meat to the actual music that everything else is just decoration on top of it. But pop music is mechanically rather shallow. I mean, it's, 4 chords and a beat with lyrics and melodies, and it's catchy and cute and stuff. I'm not saying that's what my music is because it's not that simple.
It is catchy and cute. I'll give you that.
Exactly. It's catchy and fun. But I think that the greatest part of pop music is that it presents this mass appeal. It's made for the masses. That's why it's pop music. It's popular music. And so it gives you the opportunity to say, here's this sound that creates a giant stage. What do you say on that stage? And that is where I'd like it to translate to queer issues.
Yeah, and I feel like it's music, the music industry, we're always being optimistic about it because you see all of these queer artists like Sophie, Dorian, Electra, and as like Brazil, Pablo Vittar, which is the biggest pop star who is drag, and in the music industry. And it's great to see that it's actually being normalized slowly, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
And it's just, I would just like to emphasize your importance in bringing back these conversations to the forefront of the music industry. I really admire Kid Souf in that way.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this on, your platform as well.
Yeah. Also, I'm gonna link the gender interview and their singles whenever this goes up on our blog post and YouTube channel. So yeah, great.
Thank you.
And about Better as Friends specifically, I just want to talk a little bit more about it. I have the little CD here and the bracelet.
Oh yes, thank you.
So cute.
Thank you. It took forever, so I'm so glad you like it.
Yeah, when we got in the mail, I instantly just put it on, sent the photo of my stories, which is great.
Oh, thank you.
And can you talk us a little bit more about the process, just the writing process, recording process, and the music video with your friend?
Yeah, Better as Friends was kind of just a fun thing to do. We were so Chris was working at this studio in Delaware at the time. He had a session with some musicians, and another friend of ours, Steve, was in the studio as well. We were just kind of sitting around and waiting for Chris to get out. Wrote actually 2 other songs that never went anywhere, but while we were waiting for him. And then when we got back to Chris's house afterward, we were all tired, didn't know what to do, and didn't really have that much motivation to make anything. So Chris and Steve just started like playing stuff on the guitar, and I wrote the first verse. It's like one of the first songs that I kind of just wrote in a linear fashion. I usually start with like a pre-chorus or the chorus, and then like mold the song around that. But this was the first time that like it just was first verse, pre-chorus, chorus, second verse, like writing it like that. And so I wrote the first verse and I was like, it's all right. Like it's good. It's fine. And then we got to the chorus and this, like they played the chord and I was like, and when that, I was like, what if the guitar matches the vocal part?
And that's where the amazing riff comes
and
from.
That's when
it's
it became
so catchy.
It was thank you. And that's when it became a song. We were like, it went from being like, oh, it's good, it's fun, it probably won't go anywhere, but at least we did something tonight, to being like, I need to release this. We need to get it out. And so yeah, just it's I think a good introduction to what's coming. But everything else that's coming after it, I really can't stress this enough. I'm so excited to show what else we've got going on.
And just regarding what's coming next, what would you describe the sound of the future releases from Kid Souf? Can you give us a spoiler?
Well, I'm not sure when you plan on putting this out, but the second single is called Tomato Potato. And it is dark, it is sexy, it is really complex in sounds, explores vocal ranges a lot more than I did in Better as Friends, and still maintains the catchiness. So it's dark in the way that like all of these songs are very much danceable. They're fun, but are about really, really dark stuff in my life. Tomato Potato is just a little bit more obvious about it. It's the same situation, and like the opening lyrics are, I've got a spliff rolled for this conversation. Can we talk about our situation? Can we talk? I've got my hair done nice and flowers on the table. I've loved you good as I was able, but can we talk? And that I think just kind of sets a different stage than Better as Friends did.
It's a much more like personable, directly personable song.
Yeah, and honestly, Better as Friends was written, produced, and done, and the video was produced and done back in October. And so there's been so much personal growth between then and now that we actually, so while I was getting ready to put out Better as Friends, not the version that you heard, I sent it to my voice teacher and she didn't have time to listen to it. So she played it as the next student was walking out. And the next student happened to be this investor who money built the King of Prussia Mall, if you're familiar with that.
Oh my God.
Largest malls in America.
Yeah.
And so he turned around and said, I would put money behind that. And she was like, oh, well, it's one of my students. And so he was working with, if you're familiar with the Hooters, They're a big band in the 80s. And Dave Ossickinen, the drummer, he was working with him to work on some music acts and do things like that. So they took the song and Tomato Potato and put it in the studio with a producer in Slovenia named Martin Stibernik.
Slovenia. Fancy.
Yeah.
So fancy.
Right. It's so crazy that like this much stuff happened during a global pandemic where we weren't allowed to travel. So it was like the use of technology was so important. But we went in the studio in New Jersey and just over the bridge from Philly. And we had him on FaceTime and he was directing the session and we recut the vocals. He remixed everything. And that's the version that you heard that's out, for the world to hear. But he also did Tomato Potato. He's doing the next 2 after that as well. We've got sessions in July for those. That's kind of the process that happened with those songs.
I'm so excited for Tomato Potato. I did not know that.
I'm so excited to show it to you.
When should we be expecting it?
I mean, I if we're putting this out like in mid to end of July, I will say that the song is going to be out August 6th with a video.
With the video. Is that
Yes.
the boxing one?
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Oh yeah. It's really exciting.
And just to wrap it up, I have 2 fun questions. Which the first one is you have on your Spotify My Future Friends playlist, which is such a fun concept. And I would love to know, out of everyone, living or dead, any musician, who would you like to collaborate with the most?
Collaborate with? That's a great question. Actually work and collaborate with probably either Jamiroquai or Harry Styles. To hang out with and just chill, Miley Cyrus. And to never meet but to always idolize Lady Gaga.
To never meet but always idolize.
I don't know. I'd be scared to be.
She's too powerful.
It's this like she's up here. I'd rather her remain a god, if that makes sense.
Not tarnish the view.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah, great choices. Jamiroquai especially.
yeah. I love his music. So good.
Same. And last thing, here at WSUM, the show that I have for this summer is called That's So Cringe, where it's mostly about embracing your guilty pleasures and like seeing that they're not guilty at all. You're just scared to admit that you like them, and just overall like being proud of what you listen to. And I would love to know, what is your musical guilty pleasure?
Carly Rae Jepsen.
Yeah.
Not so much guilty though. She's really good.
It's such great pop music,
It
especially her
is.
later albums.
Absolutely. The most recent ones are my favorites so far. She's beautiful. I mean, fantastic pop music. That and Impetuous. They're just the most perfect, like polished, like this is pop music definition. Open a dictionary and their faces are there for what pop music is. And I love that.
I agree. Not a guilty pleasure at all. I appreciate it. Great choices overall. And thank you so much for talking to me and just coming to that WSUM. I appreciate it so much. Better Friends, please stream the single.
Please.
And yeah, thank you so much, James, Kid Souf. I appreciate the talk.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.